Bless all the paths our feet walk to be free. Bless all the paths our feet walk to be free.
This is our last Practical Jesus Sunday.
Practical Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. There's plenty of impractical Jesus around, but this is our last Practical Jesus Sunday. Because what we haven't ever talked about, and I will talk about, we've got a couple other things happening in the middle, is the mystical Jesus. And so we haven't even talked about the mystical Jesus. We've talked about the practical Jesus message. And I didn't want to confuse them, because I think that's how we've gotten confused, is we've tried to not take away things, and then that keeps us from hearing. So if the practical Jesus has been too much for you, you can relish in the thought that he's done. At least from me on Sunday morning. So Angie O'Gorman describes being awakened one night by a man kicking in her bedroom door. The house was empty. She was upstairs. The phone was downstairs. He continued to be verbally abusive as he walked over to her bed and stood over her. And all she could see was the sort of the outline of his form. And she laid there with an amount of fear and vulnerability that she had never experienced before in her entire life. And as she did that, several things ran through her mind. The first one was, it would be useless to scream. The second one was that as much as she might have entertained the fallacy of having a gun under her pillow, she didn't imagine that this man would stand patiently while she pulled it out and shot him. And the third one was the one that she attributes to being the one that probably saved her life. And that was her realization that they had to get through this safely together. If he raped her, she would be emotionally and physically harmed. But he would be harmed also. And if he went to prison, he would be harmed even more. And it was that thought that disarmed her. And it was that thought that kept her from lashing out. As afraid as she was, she really understood they were in this together. So she asked him what time it was. And he answered her. And she commented that her bedside clock and his watch weren't telling the same time. So she was concerned that maybe his watch was broken. And she asked him when was the last time he had actually made sure that his time was correct. And the atmosphere began to calm a little. And she asked him how he got in the house, and he said that he had broken through the back door. And she talked to him about her concern and shared that, she didn't have the money to fix the door, and that this was really a problem for her now. And he began then to share with her his financial problems. And as they got to know each other better, and they no longer were strangers, she courageously asked him to leave. And he told her he didn't have anywhere to go. So she said she would give him sheets, and he could go downstairs and he could make a bed on the couch. And he agreed. She, of course, sat up all night long, still completely afraid. And the next morning they got up and they had breakfast together, and he left. So, what was her weapon? Her weapon was treating him like a human being. And it caught him off guard. And remember, we talked about what Jesus said about how to treat your oppressors? To catch them off guard. Because the oppressor expects you to behave in a certain way. He expects, and this goes for the domination system also, that there is a certain way this will work out, a certain response you will have, and that's what allows the game to continue with him in power, or her, or they. The response from the oppressed, if it was violence or hostility or panic or helplessness, what the assailant expects will happen, just simply reinforces and encourages him to continue to be hostile. Because that's the game that is known. But when the victim doesn't play the game and instead presents the unknown and the unexpected and what O'Gorman calls wonder, it tends to diffuse the hostility. And I like this idea she calls wonder. She says, wonder is compassion towards your oppressor. Remember when Jesus talked about to carry the pack the extra mile? They'll be all messed up. Because why are you being nice to me? And it is that simple conversation that she had with him. That desire for human connection is then activated. And our desire for human connection is so strong that it began to do what happens in our human psyche. We can't do both. We can't be in that space of really in that connection and really cruel at the same time. And that desire is so strong in us that we would prefer that than to continue to play the game. So, I bet most of you have asked yourself, what if? What if someone broke into my house? What if someone tried to hurt my children? What if someone tried to carjack me? What if someone tried to mug me on the street? What if, and what would they do if I did? And truthfully, it's impossible to know that until it happens. If it ever happens, you don't really know what you would do. But my guess is that most of us have answered that anyway. And most of us have answered it in some way, at least at some point in time in our life, that with the use of a weapon maybe as being part of how that would go. And certainly our willingness to resort to some kind of violence. And who would blame us? Because we don't know anything else. I don't even know if we know that. But that's what we've been taught to know. And remember, being socialized by the domination system, it's just the common response to every threat is violence. So how did Angie O'Gorman manage to stay calm and treat her assailant with respect in the midst of all of that fear and threat? Because Nancy O'Gorman had studied and taught and practiced nonviolence for years. Such a response could come from her because she had been rehearsing nonviolence in her life for years. She had spent time in prayer and meditation and training and mediation, negotiation. She had made nonviolence a priority in her life. That is how she could manage that in that moment. So how many of us have been rehearsing nonviolence for years? Boning up on our mediation and negotiation skills. Do most of us even know where we would start? Because why? Because we have been in a system. Don't feel bad if you don't have your nonviolence training certificate hanging on your wall somewhere at home. Most people don't. After all, if we have been brought up in the values of the domination system, we've had to break away and go looking for something else. We've had to put in some effort if we wanted to find another way of being in the world. Because those aren't the values in the domination system. We weren't taught nonviolence in schools it wasn't part of our mandatory curriculum in college. And most of us didn't even learn it in church. Although, where is he? Where's Jerry? There he is. He has a church that teaches nonviolence, that has programs, but not everybody does. And it has to be specific to there are very few spiritual groups or religious groups or theologies in the world that have that as a specific part of their mission. He happens to belong to one that does. The Brethren, and actually have it be something that is available for people to learn, nonviolence. So even if we did decide to use, so most of us, as we might have thought about these scenarios in their life, might have thought, and we might think, okay, well, we don't want nonviolent, we want to be a nonviolent person, so we will only use violence as a last resort. When is the moment that is the last moment? When do we decide when it is that last opportunity and moment that we must now resort to violence? When do we decide that this is the last resort we will hit our children? When have we decided that as a last resort we would hit a spouse or someone we love? You see, the problem with violence is, as a last resort, is that we are likely not to allow enough time for something else to work before we are already in the moment of the last resort. We are less likely to hold out for the miraculous, for someone to change their mind, for love to transform. We are more likely to jump to violence sooner than later if we have already decided that as a last resort, this is what we will do. Because I'm thinking if I was her laying in that bed, I might have been at my last resort moment. At some point in time in there might have been my last resort moment to, grab the lamp, try to conk him over the head, something. Who knows? But she was committed to nonviolence. So there was no last resort moment for her. There was just simply, it is not something I will do. You see, choosing nonviolence requires some kind of trust. And as Walter Wink puts it, it requires us to walk into the water before it parts. If we are not committed in advance, he says this, we are likely to grope for a trigger instead of a prayer. It may be that only an unconditional renunciation of violence can concentrate our minds sufficiently to find nonviolent response when the crisis comes. So do you see the dilemma that we're in? We have no idea how to be nonviolent. We have not been taught. We are not in a part of the world where it is practiced. And when times get tough, no matter how much we think we might be committed to it, we might not even know how to do it. And as central as it was to Jesus' message, and as Christian as a world that we come from, and as much as we have been taught his message, very few of us have really been taught how to live a non-violent life. So, even if we've chose it, are we prepared for it if we need it? And even if we've chose it, I just want to say this, because this is so true of all other things we say we choose. Talk is cheap. Have we taken the time, the effort, the money? Have we taken any of our personal energy and gone out and really gotten training, gotten into practice? Are we teaching other people? Are we really actively creating a nonviolent world? Or are we just thinking that that's what we believe? Because there's a big difference between belief and action. A very big difference. It has been proven over time that nonviolence will work where violence would have worked. And where it fails, violence would fail too. Because sometimes, no matter how much violence you impose upon a situation, it still doesn't change. I mean, my gosh, look at Libya. There's a lot of bombing going on. Gaddafi, he's still there. So, even though there's a tremendous amount of violence being waged at that particular thing that's happening in the world, not a lot of change has been made at finding a different kind of resolution. The goal of nonviolence is to create a nonviolent society, which means that we create a society that makes other choices. So every time nonviolence is chosen, people have the opportunity to see that there's another way. Oh my gosh, I'll try it when I'm in a situation, or I'll try it with the people around me. The real goal is exactly what we've talked about, ushering in the quantum worldview that Jesus talked about, where violence is not an option. So besides working on our commitment to nonviolence by praying and meditating and training and practicing and learning, we have to do what's the toughest part of all of this, which is to learn to love our enemies. Oh, and by the way, so this is a true question. I'm truly asking, because there are people out there So if we had a nonviolence training here or class or course, how many people would come? Because violence is right here. It doesn't require a situation. It doesn't require anything to be happening. And we are propelling into the universe our amazing violent thoughts. Because it is our hearts that have to change first in order for us to really embrace this idea. And when our hearts are fully changed, one of the things we'll know is lacking is our ability to know how to do it in the world. And then is when we'll be inspired to follow that path and to follow that idea. So besides that, this age-old question and the central theme of Jesus' teaching is love your enemy. Love yourself, love God, love your enemy. Pretty much everything else was the how-to. If we could make ourselves believe that everyone who we perceive as an enemy was coming into our life or coming into our situation or some greater thing we're connected to, if every one of them were coming in and were bringing us a gift, so if we could begin to see them with some sort of excited anticipation in wondering what that gift was going to be, might it be easier to love them? Because what our first thought is, and our first energy, and our first aversion is to get them out of our life, to get them away, to keep them away, to stop them from what they're doing. Whatever we've called them enemy about, it is about getting them to stop what they're doing. So before we can actually believe they're bringing us a gift, there's a couple things that are theologically embedded in our society, and they're embedded in Christianity, and we have to think about this. First of all, this is the one most important one, that God loves our enemies as much as God loves us. God is on their side as much as God is on ours. Ever hear about people praying like at football games? Well, for what? They should be praying nobody gets injured. Praying that everybody has a good time. Praying that our highest and best, excited, most fulfilled moments come. But to win? God does not care about winners and losers. God doesn't even care about the oppressor and the victim. That isn't on the radar either. Both people are loved as much. As many blessings are falling on both people. So when we start thinking we're right, or we're the victim, or we're any of those things, one of the things we have to remember is we can't count on God to fix this in the way we would like to count on God to fix this. So, and if we're ushering in this quantum worldview, we have to do what? We have to act like God. That's what that worldview is. That worldview is oneness. It is love. It is not separation. It is the power of transformational love. So what we have to do immediately is to begin to understand that in order for us to usher in the world we're looking for, we must behave like that. And this wonderful, there's lots of them, but the love your neighbor, and Jesus says no, you should hate your neighbor, and Jesus says no, you should love your neighbor, pray for those who persecute you. In that way, you will be acting as true children of your Father in heaven, for he gives his sunlight to both the evil and the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust alike. This is our world. God's not playing around in it. The second thing we need to be clear about is that God is not the source of anyone's punishment. Not even yours. No one's. No one's punished by God. No one. We're punished by our own actions, by our own inabilities to be in that space of love. And then so crap happens. But God doesn't make any of that happen. So we are not, our enemies or those people we deem as separate from us are not being punished by something. And neither are we. And so, as much as society has made it society's thing to pit us against each other by calling people good and calling people evil, that's just our game. That is just simply our game. And our game doesn't work in the quantum worldview. Our game works in the domination system. We have to stop playing that game. That game is out. So, how many people watched the Casey Anthony trial? Everything that's going on out in the streets around her, making her an evil, demonic, whatever person that they want to think she is, all that's got to go. All that has to go. All of it. It doesn't matter if they saw her doing it. It's still got to go, that attitude. Because what has happened to all of the people who are oppressors? They have been oppressed. This isn't something we come in with. This is something we learn in our life experience. But that idea, no matter how you want to separate it out and make this group good and this group bad, that all that has to go. And one of the things is we have, the domination system has taken really, really small things. So like our skin color and some really small things about us, the way we dress, the kind of jobs we have, our socioeconomic position in the world, our health. People are no good because of their health in this country. They're worthless because of their state of health or their weight or their all these things. We automatically can look at people and go, oh, that's the blessed bunch. This is the unblessed bunch. All those things, those tiny little judgments, all those things that separate us, that keep us separate, none of those things work out over here in Jesus' quantum worldview. Those are all part of the domination system. And when we no longer play that game, what happens? What happened with Angie O'Gorman? The oppressor didn't know what to do anymore. So when we stop playing, the system will not know what to do anymore. But we haven't stopped. As light as all of we are, even in this room, and I can say this because I'm standing here and I know it, I haven't stopped. It's conscious effort every moment to not be playing the game, to not be looking at people and deciding, what about them? So if we want to be in alignment with this divine reality that we want to be in, and in 2012 is coming, and we're creating this new world, boy, we have got a ways to go, and we got to get going. And I mean it. Forget all the stuff about putting your cupboards full of food and hiding water and stuff. It won't make any difference. Only thing that will make a difference is the transformation of us inside to be a different kind of people to each other. There's where the work needs to be done, and there's where the work needs to be done quickly. All the rest of it, it won't matter. I'm telling you, it won't make any difference. Because people that are going to hoard their stuff and hide in their houses, it's not going to go far. We would all like to define ourselves as good and just. Yes? But we know better. Yes? We know we're like everybody else. And that's the other part of remembering this thing about our enemies. They're good some of the time, they're not so good some of the time. We're good some of the time, we're not so good some of the time. Same people, just different situations. And the love you part about yourself. This is where it all really, 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 really lies. All the darkness really, really lies in the love you part, the love yourself part. Because guess what? Our enemies have come. They have shown us something that we can't see without them. We can't see it without them. We can't see it without them. I want you to really get this part about our enemies and why they're so important. We can't see our shadow without them. We can't see our own darkness without them. Should we love them? Oh my God, yes. We should be at their feet, thanking them, because we won't move on. We don't get to be anything greater in this universe until we acknowledge it, until we love it, until we see it, until we can bless it. Our enemies bring us the greatest gift because, our friends, they overlook that stuff about us. They're like, yeah, no, you know. I know she's that way. What the heck? She's my friend. Our enemies, they don't do that. They go right for the jugular, right for that thing you hate about yourself the most. And why do they do that? Because we have, listen to why we can't get rid of them. We can't get rid of our enemies because we love ourselves so little that if we don't have somebody to project that crap on, we would die. We're never going to get rid of our enemies until we love ourselves. We will have to find one. We'll have to find somebody. We'll have to find somebody to project all that hatred and anger and sadness on. And right now, our enemy works perfect. We look around for them. Who's my next enemy? You might as well just say, who's my next victim? Because that's exactly what we're doing. We are just projecting onto everybody else what we don't. So when it says this idea of loving yourself, we can't overlook that. We can't even flash over that one and say, oh, but I'll love my enemies. It's so much easier. No, you can't. It's impossible. You can never love them till you love you. It just won't happen. You'll find one. You can hold it back. You can do all kinds of things. And you know that difference between the truth and the BS. We go around BSing about how much we love people and how great it all is pretty often. Jesus says this thing that, you see, Jesus knew about projection. And this is proof. It says, and why worry about the speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own? How do you think of saying to your friend, let me help you get that speck out of your eye when you can't see past the log in your own eye, hypocrite? First, get rid of the log in your own eye, and then you will be able to see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's. Now, you know what's so genius about this message is? Same log, just a different splinter off of it. Same log. Your darkness is what you see. Now, what we would tend to say is, well, I know I have a little bit of that in me. So in other words, what you're really saying is, no, I only have the speck. And they have the big problem. But Jesus' point goes right to the person and says, no, you have the log. Why did he do it that way? He did it that way because when you look at them as the bad, you can't see anything anymore about you. So you're the one with the biggest problem, not them. Doesn't matter what they're doing. You've got the biggest problem because what you're doing is refusing to see, first of all, what your role can be with them. Second of all, what they are doing for you, and it's all about them. So you're the one who really has the problem, not them. With this kind of revelation are exactly the ones that we need from our enemies, exactly the ones we need our enemies to bring to us, so that we can begin to see the greatest truth about us. Walter Wink puts it this way. He says, we cannot come to terms with our shadow except through our enemy, for we have no better access to these unacceptable parts of ourselves that need redeeming than through the mirror that our enemy holds up to us. This then is another more intimate reason for loving our enemies. We are dependent on our enemies for our very self-awareness. We cannot become whole without them. How wonderfully humiliating. We may not only have a role in transforming our enemies, but our enemies certainly have a role in transforming us. So our oppressors have a role in transforming us. And if we take it and we can look at it that way, one of the things that we can really see is that all we've ever been fighting is our own shadow. That's it. We have always only ever been fighting our own shadow. Our own ego manifestation is the only enemy we have ever had in this world. Not any of our brothers and sisters. Just the systems and the outpouring of our own darkness into the world. That's it. That's it. Isn't that amazing? So there's no big boogeymen out there. It's all here. There's nothing out there that we really need to fight against except what we've created as darkness in the world. There are no bad people. There are just some bad ideas, some bad thoughts, some bad beliefs. So the commandment to our enemy might begin in some sort of a pastoral role. And that is first helping them recover their own humanity. Us first actively engaging in the recovery of their own humanity. One evening during the civil rights movements in Selma, Alabama, a large crowd of black and white activists were standing outside the Ebenezer Baptist Church singing when someone ran up and took the microphone and said that in the capital city, there had been a group of young black male students from a university protesting. They were surrounded by police horses, and then they couldn't get away, and then they were beaten. And then the ambulances were kept out of that circle for 2 hours. So they just laid there, injured, for 2 hours before the police would let them get to them. And so, of course, this crowd outside the church became enraged, and the situation became very tense when this young minister took the microphone, and he said, "It's time to sing." And he opened with the line, and Mel probably knows the tune that he used when he said these words, "Do you love Martin Luther King?" And the crowd sang back, "Certainly, Lord." And so he echoed, "Do you love Martin Luther King?" "Certainly, Lord." "Do you love Martin Luther King?" "Certainly, certainly, certainly, Lord." And he kept going through the names of all the people in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He kept singing out their name, and the crowd kept echoing back, "Certainly, Lord." Without warning, he sang out, "Do you love Jim Clark?" who was standing across the street because he was the local sheriff. And he was standing over there with all of his police officers. And this sort of hesitant, very guarded, "Certainly, Lord," came echoing back. And he said it again, "Do you love Jim Clark?" And the crowd, once again, a little stronger, said, "Certainly, Lord." And then he sang it again, "Do you love Jim Clark?" And they got it. They sang it out full voiced and loud, "Certainly, certainly, certainly, Lord." And at that point, another minister took the microphone, and he explained that they weren't just fighting for their rights, but for the good of the whole society. And he said in the microphone, "It is not enough to defeat Jim Clark. Can you hear me, Jim? We want you converted. We can't win by hating our oppressors. We have to love them into changing." Jim Clark was a victim of the domination system, and in that moment, those people had the opportunity to see it. They got it. And a few years later, Jim Clark got it too. And he agreed that he had been wrong all along. Anyone can be transformed regardless of their past, and for us to believe that nonviolent communication can't work with a certain group of people because they're just to this or to that is no different than the racist ideas that got them and us separate to begin with. And by racist, I mean any ideas that they're too violent, that they're too anything. Because loving our enemies is a way of living in expectation of miracles. Remember the quantum physics collapsed wave idea that we talked about? Where until we decide something, every opportunity is still out there. And in loving our enemies and choosing nonviolence and waiting for that power of the moment of miracle or love to transform leaves that wave possibility open. The minute we have decided that we would use violence, or that they're not transformable, or that they're not good enough to transform, we collapse the wave and that possibility goes away. So loving our enemies is one way to keep that possibility open for them and for us. If I believe, and I think we all in this room believe, we're worthy of another chance. We're worthy of being forgiven. We're worthy of keeping around. We're worthy of doing something greater next time. Why wouldn't we think everybody is? Loving our enemies is simply seeing our oppressors in the eyes through the eyes of the quantum worldview. Giving that opportunity of transformation through love a chance. So in the light of that love, I want you to ask yourself, what if you committed yourself to a life of nonviolence? What if you committed yourself to training and practice and prayer and meditation until it becomes second nature? What if our quantum world hinged on it?
I like the real Jesus.
Bless all the past.